6 weeks after I buried my husband, I used a key I'd never seen before to open an apartment I didn't know existed, and someone was living there. Not had been living there. Was. Present tense. Toothbrush on the sink. Coffee in the cabinet. A woman's cardigan draped over the back of a chair like she'd just stepped out to grab lunch and planned to be back by 2. My husband had been dead for 6 weeks. And somewhere in this city, a woman was still going home to the life he built for her. The same man who coached our son's little league games. The same man I held while he cried at his mother's funeral. The same man whose name is on my mortgage, on my kids' birth certificates, on the headstone I picked out in the rain on a Thursday morning because someone had to. That man had another life. A complete one. And she didn't know about me either. My name is Claire. I'm 41 years old, and I teach junior English at a public high school in Millbrook, Ohio, which is exactly the kind of town where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. The kind of place where people know your name at the grocery store, where your kids ride their bikes to the neighbor's yard, where Friday nights mean football games and bad coffee from the concession stand. I was married for 14 years to a man named Daniel. He was 44 when he died. Mechanical engineer. Coached our son's little league team 2 springs in a row. Made really good pancakes on Sunday mornings. Hated horror movies but never told me until our 3rd year of marriage, which I always thought was a little funny. We had 2 kids, Mia, who just turned 12, and Josh, who's 9. And we had a house with a porch I always meant to repaint, and a dog named Biscuit who still waits by the front door every evening around 6. By every measure I knew how to use, we had a good life. I'm not telling you this story because I'm angry. I'm past angry. Or at least, I visit it less often than I used to. I'm telling you this because I spent an entire year believing I had buried the man I married, and what I actually buried was a version of him he built specifically for me. The rest of it, I had to find on my own. Daniel Marsh was not a flashy man. That was actually one of the first things I noticed about him. We met at a work thing, a mutual friend's going away party at a bar in Columbus, the kind of party where nobody really wants to be there, but everyone shows up anyway because they feel guilty if they don't. He was standing near the back, holding a beer he'd barely touched, looking mildly uncomfortable in the way that felt honest rather than awkward. No performance, no angle. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. I thought, that's either a really secure person or someone with absolutely nothing interesting to say. Turns out it was the first one. At least, that's what I believed for 14 years. We got married in 2009. Small wedding, backyard of my aunt's house in Cincinnati, string lights and a barbecue, and my grandmother complaining about the humidity the entire afternoon. Daniel cried a little during the vows. Not in a dramatic way. Just his jaw went tight, and his eyes got glassy, and he looked at me like I was the only solid thing in the room. I have a photo of that exact moment on my nightstand. Had it there for 12 years. I took it down 8 months ago. I still haven't decided what to do with it. For most of our marriage, Daniel worked for a civil engineering firm out of Dayton. Long hours, occasional travel. Sometimes a few days in Cleveland or Cincinnati when a project was in crunch mode. Sometimes a full week if they were doing site inspections out of state. I never questioned it. Why would I? He always texted when he landed. Always called to say goodnight to the kids. Always came home with gas station candy for Mia and Josh because he knew they'd be waiting up. He was present. That's the word I keep coming back to. Even when he wasn't physically there, he was present. Remembered things. Asked follow-up questions. Knew that Mia was nervous about her math test, and that Josh had a thing about the seam on his left sock that had to be perfectly aligned, or he'd lose his mind before school. Good fathers notice that stuff. Good husbands notice that stuff, and Daniel noticed everything. Looking back now, I think that's what made it so hard to see. Because the signs people always talk about, the distance, the coldness, the defensiveness, the late nights that don't add up, Daniel didn't have those. Or if he did, they were so small, so perfectly calibrated, that I filed them under he's tired, or work is stressful, and moved on. There was one moment, maybe 2 years before he died. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner, kids already in bed, and I asked him, kind of out of nowhere, if he was happy. Not in a confrontational way. Just, I don't know, one of those quiet Tuesday night questions that bubbles up when everything is still. He looked at me for a second longer than usual. Then he said, "I have everything I need." I thought that was a beautiful answer. I wrote it in my journal that night. I understand now that it wasn't an answer at all. It was a man who had learned very carefully how to tell the truth and lie at the exact same time. He died on a Wednesday, October 9th, 7:22 in the morning. I know the exact time because the highway patrol officer who knocked on my door 2 hours later read it off a form he was holding. The kind of form that has blanks to fill in, like a life can be summarized in a series of boxes. Time of incident, location, next of kin. Daniel had a massive heart attack behind the wheel on I-75, about 4 miles from our house. The car drifted into the right shoulder and hit the guardrail at low speed. The paramedics said he was likely gone before the car even stopped moving. He was 44 years old, no prior cardiac history, didn't smoke, ran 3 miles every other morning, had a physical in June. I remembered because I'd nagged him into scheduling it, and his doctor said everything looked fine. Fine. I have thought about that word more times than I can count. The kids were already at school when the officer came. That was the one mercy of the whole morning, that Mia and Josh were sitting in their classrooms learning fractions and reading assignments while their mother stood at the front door in yesterday's sweatshirt, trying to understand what the man in uniform was telling her. I remember nodding. I remember saying okay at least twice, which makes no sense because nothing about it was okay. I remember closing the door and sitting down on the bottom step of the staircase and staring at the hallway floor for a very long time. I didn't cry right away. That surprised me later. I'd always assumed grief arrived like a wave. Immediate, overwhelming, cinematic, but it didn't. It arrived like a fog. Slow and thick and directionless. The next few days happened to me more than I lived them. My sister flew in from Portland. My mother-in-law, Barbara, came with her sister and took over the kitchen in the way that older women from the Midwest do when they don't know how else to help, cooking and organizing and keeping their hands busy so they don't have to sit still with the feeling. My neighbor Carol handled the flowers for the funeral because I couldn't make a single decision that wasn't absolutely necessary. The service was on a Saturday. 83 people came. I counted them from the front row because my brain needed something to do that wasn't falling apart in public. People kept saying he was a good man, over and over. At the reception, in the cards, in the texts that kept coming for 2 weeks after. He was such a good man, Claire. And I believed them. I stood there in my black dress, with my kids pressed against my sides, and I accepted every single one of those words like they were true. Because as far as I knew, they were. Nobody tells you about the administrative side of losing someone. The death certificates. You need more copies than you'd ever expect. One for the bank, one for the insurance company, one for the DMV, one for the mortgage servicer. Like every institution needs its own personal proof that the person is actually gone. The phone calls where you have to say my husband passed away to a stranger in a call center who responds with a scripted, "I'm so sorry for your loss," before asking you to verify the last 4 digits of his social security number. The inbox. God. The inbox. Daniel handled most of our finances. Not because I couldn't. I'm a functioning adult with a graduate degree. But because early in our marriage, we'd divided things up practically, and it had just stayed that way. He paid the bills, managed the accounts, dealt with the insurance. I handled the kids' schedules, the medical appointments, the school stuff. It worked. Or it seemed to. So when I finally sat down at his desk 6 weeks after the funeral and opened his laptop, his password was our dog's name, Biscuit, followed by Josh's birth year, which I figured out on the 3rd try. I was expecting to feel overwhelmed by logistics. I was not expecting what I actually found, but that comes later. In those first weeks, I was mostly just trying to stay vertical. Get the kids to school, respond to emails, sign the forms, eat something before noon. Grief has a strange way of making the smallest tasks feel like physical labor, like your whole body is running at half power and every normal thing costs twice as much energy as it used to. I started with the easy stuff. His closet. I told myself I wasn't ready to donate anything yet. I was just organizing, which was a lie I needed to believe at the time. I folded sweaters I knew I'd never give away. I lined up his shoes in a row that made no practical sense. I pressed my face into the collar of his gray fleece pullover that he'd had since before we met, and I let myself fall apart for about 4 minutes. And then I stopped because Mia was downstairs, and she has always been able to tell when something is wrong, and she was already carrying enough. It was during that second pass through the closet, the one where I was actually trying to be practical, that I found the coat. His good coat. The charcoal wool one he wore to client dinners and holiday parties, and Mia's winter recital last December. It had been hanging in the back, behind the everyday jackets. Zipped up in the dry cleaning bag it came back in sometime last spring. I took it out to check the pockets before storing it. Right side, a gas station receipt, February 14th. A coffee and a pack of gum. I stared at that for longer than I should have. Valentine's Day. He'd brought me flowers that evening. Tulips because he knew I liked them better than roses, and made reservations at that Italian place on 5th that we always meant to go to more often. I had thought it was a good day. Left side, nothing. Inner breast pocket, my fingers closed around something cold. A key ring. 2 keys. Small, plain. The kind that opens a deadbolt and a mailbox. And attached to them, a little rectangular tag. Plastic, slightly yellowed at the edges. The kind that comes in a pack of 10 from the hardware store. On it, in Daniel's handwriting. That specific mix of print and cursive that I had read on grocery lists and birthday cards and sticky notes on the fridge for 14 years. An address. 412 Elm Court, Apt 4B, Dayton. I stood in that closet for a long time. Then I put the keys in my nightstand drawer. Went downstairs, made the kids grilled cheese for dinner, helped Josh with his spelling words, and did not tell a single person what I had found. For 3 days, I pretended I hadn't found anything at all. 3 days. That's how long I managed to leave them in the drawer. I'd open it sometimes, in the morning before the kids woke up or late at night after the house went quiet, and just look at them. The keys sitting there on top of a chapstick and an old phone charger and a bookmark Mia had made me in 2nd grade with her handprint on it. Just sitting there, ordinary and devastating at the same time. I told myself 100 different stories in those 3 days. It was a storage unit. Daniel had mentioned once, maybe 2 years back, that he was thinking about renting one for his work equipment, blueprints, field gear, stuff that was taking up space in the garage. Maybe he'd actually done it and just never mentioned it again. That was possible. That was a completely reasonable explanation. It was a property investment. He'd talked vaguely about real estate a few times over the years. Nothing serious, nothing concrete, just the kind of conversation married people have at 10 o'clock at night when they're half watching something on TV and imagining a future that feels safely distant. Maybe he'd actually done something about it. Maybe he was going to surprise me. Maybe it was nothing. I Googled the address on the second night after the kids went to bed. Sat in the kitchen with the brightness on my laptop, turned all the way down, like someone might see what I was looking at. 412. Elm Court was a residential apartment complex in a quiet part of Dayton. 3 stories, brick exterior, the kind of building that's been there since the 80s and hasn't changed much since. Decent neighborhood. 7 minutes from Daniel's office, 9 minutes from our house. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. On the 3rd day, a Tuesday, overcast, kids at school, nothing on my calendar until pickup at 3, I got in my car. I didn't call anyone, didn't text, didn't write it down anywhere or leave any kind of record of where I was going. I just drove. And the whole way there I kept thinking, if this turns out to be a storage unit full of old blueprints, I'm going to laugh about this for the rest of my life. I did not laugh. The building was exactly what Google Street View had shown me. Brick. 3 floors. A small parking lot in the front with faded lines and a dumpster near the entrance that someone had decorated with a bumper sticker that said, "Have a nice day" in yellow letters. There was a buzzer panel by the front door with little handwritten name tags next to each unit number. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. Then I got out. The front door was propped open with a doorstop. The kind of low security detail that exists in buildings where everyone knows everyone and nobody thinks twice about it. I walked in without buzzing. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and someone's lunch. Something with garlic, warm and faint. A bicycle was chained to the stairwell railing on the 1st floor, even though there was probably a rule against that somewhere. Normal. Aggressively. Almost insultingly normal. Apartment 4B was on the 3rd floor. I took the stairs. I don't know why. The elevator was right there. But taking the stairs felt like it gave me a few more seconds to change my mind. I counted them. 14 steps to the 2nd floor landing. 14 more to the 3rd. The hallway up top was narrow and quiet. A doormat outside 4A had a cartoon dog on it. Someone had taped a hand-drawn birthday banner to the door of 4C. "Happy birthday, Kevin!" in green marker, slightly crooked, clearly made by a kid. I stopped in front of 4B. Plain door, no mat, no decoration. A small smudge near the handle. The kind that comes from years of the same hand reaching for the same spot without thinking. I put the key in the lock. It fit. Of course it fit. I had known it would fit. But there is a difference between knowing something and feeling the physical confirmation of it. The tumblers turning. The bolt sliding back. The soft click of a door deciding to let you in. I pushed it open, and I stood in the doorway for a moment. One hand still on the frame, because what I saw on the other side was not what I had braced myself for. I think I had expected emptiness, or disorder, or something that looked temporary. An air mattress, a duffel bag, the kind of space a person uses and abandons. Evidence of something transient and compartmentalized, something I could categorize and contain. Instead, the apartment was, and I need you to understand how much this word cost me. Home. Not extravagant, not a love nest, not some glossy secret life. Just a lived-in, quiet, ordinary home. A couch with a throw blanket folded over the arm. A coffee table with a coaster on it. One coaster, the kind you actually use. A bookshelf with actual books, spines cracked from reading. A kitchen with a dish rack next to the sink. 2 plates and a mug drying face down the way my mother always said was the right way to dry dishes. 2 plates. I walked in slowly. My shoes on the hardwood sounded too loud. Daniel's work jacket. The navy one. The Carhartt he'd had for years. The one I had assumed was lost sometime last winter when I couldn't find it. Was hanging on a hook by the door. I touched the sleeve. Still there. Still real. In the bedroom, the bed was made. Not perfectly. The left side was slightly more rumpled than the right, like someone had smoothed it quickly rather than carefully. On the nightstand on the right side, a phone charger, a paperback with a receipt used as a bookmark, a glass of water that had mostly evaporated, leaving a faint ring on the wood. On the nightstand on the left side, a tube of hand lotion. Small pink label. The kind that comes in a 3-pack from Target. I opened the closet. Daniel's clothes on the right side. Not all of them. Specific ones. The blue Oxford he wore to site meetings. 2 pairs of work pants. A belt I had given him for his birthday 3 years ago and assumed he'd lost. On the left side of the closet, women's clothes. A few blouses. A pair of jeans. A dress still in a dry cleaning bag, the plastic slightly fogged with time. I closed the closet. Walked to the bathroom, and there it was. 2 toothbrushes in the cup by the sink. His, the gray one I recognized, and next to it, a pink one. And beside the cup, a prescription bottle, a woman's name on the label, a name I had never heard in 14 years of marriage. Renee. I didn't touch the prescription bottle. I don't know why that was my line. I had already walked into a dead man's secret apartment, opened his closet, touched his clothes. But something about picking up that bottle felt like a boundary I wasn't ready to cross yet. Like as long as I didn't hold it in my hands, I could still be a woman who had stumbled into a mistake. So I just read it. Renee Calloway. A medication for thyroid condition. Refilled the previous month. Prescribed by a doctor at a practice in Dayton. 38 tablets remaining. She had been here recently enough that her prescription was current. I set that information down somewhere in the back of my mind. Carefully, the way you set down something fragile, and walked back into the living room. I think I was in a kind of shock that doesn't look like shock from the outside. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was moving through that apartment the way you move through a museum, slowly, observantly, with a kind of horrible and specific attention to detail that I think my brain invented to keep me from collapsing on the floor. I looked at everything. The refrigerator had a photo held on by a magnet, one of those tourism magnets from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the kind you buy at a rest stop gift shop. In the photo, Daniel was standing on what looked like a trail overlook, mountains behind him, squinting slightly into the sun. He was smiling. A real smile. The kind that reaches the eyes. The kind I had seen 1,000 times. Standing next to him, leaning slightly into his shoulder, was a woman. She was around my height, brown hair pulled back, a green jacket I didn't recognize. She was laughing at something just off camera, her head turned slightly, the way people look when someone behind the photographer has said something funny right as the shutter clicked. She looked happy. He looked happy. I had a photo almost exactly like it from a trip we took to the Smoky Mountains in 2018. Daniel squinting into the sun. That same real smile. I put the fridge magnet back exactly where I'd found it and kept moving. The kitchen calendar was the kind that hangs on a nail and flips by the month. It was still open to October, the month he died. I scanned the boxes slowly. October 3rd. Dinner. R. October 9th. Blank. The day he died, the universe had left him no reminder. October 14th. R. Appointment. Dayton Medical, 10 a.m. October 19th. Anniversary. I stared at that last one for a long time. October 19th. Our anniversary is October 19th. Mine and Daniel's. 14 years. He had made a reservation that year at a steakhouse in Columbus. I remembered because Mia had helped him pick the restaurant, had sat with him at the kitchen table one Sunday morning looking at menus on his phone, very serious about the decision in the way 9-year-olds are when they feel included in something adult. He had written anniversary on a calendar in an apartment his wife didn't know existed. I had to sit down. There was a small chair near the window, just a simple wooden chair, the kind that belongs at a desk, and I sat in it and looked out at the parking lot below and breathed very deliberately for a while. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The thing my therapist had taught me after my father died, which I had thought at the time was almost insultingly simple, and which turns out is the only thing that actually works when your body is trying to leave the room without you. After a few minutes, I got up and went to the bookshelf. The books were a mix. Some I recognized as Daniel's taste, thrillers and a few history titles, the kind of thing he'd read in hotel rooms on work trips, or what I had believed were work trips. But there were others that weren't his. A couple of novels with cracked spines, a book about grief that had a library sticker on the spine, a journal. A small cloth-covered journal with an elastic band around it. I picked it up. I held it for a moment. And then I put it back without opening it. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't respect for privacy. That ship had sailed the moment I put a dead man's key in a lock I'd never seen before. It was something else. It was the understanding, sudden and clarifying, that whatever was in that journal belonged to a woman who had no idea I existed. A woman who was going to come home at some point. Today, tomorrow, this week, and find her life exactly as she'd left it. Not yet knowing that the man she shared it with was gone. She didn't know. That thought landed differently than anything else in that apartment. She was out there somewhere in Dayton, Ohio, living a Tuesday like it was a regular Tuesday. Maybe she was at work. Maybe she was running errands. Maybe she was on her way home right now, and I was sitting in her chair, in her apartment, holding the shape of a secret that was going to destroy her life the same way it had just destroyed mine. I left the journal on the shelf. I took a photo of the calendar. I took a photo of the prescription bottle. I took a photo of the picture on the refrigerator. And then I walked out, pulled the door shut behind me, and drove home in complete silence to pick up my kids from school like it was a regular Tuesday. It was the furthest thing from a regular Tuesday. I didn't go back to the apartment. Not physically, but I went back to it every single day for the next 3 weeks in every other way possible. I became someone I didn't recognize. Methodical. Quiet. Privately obsessed in a way that had nothing to do with rage and everything to do with the specific torture of not knowing the full shape of something. I needed to understand, not to feel better. I was well past the point where understanding could make me feel better. But because something in me refused to grieve a version of Daniel that might not have been real. I needed to know what was real, so I started with what I had access to. His laptop first. I had already been into it for the practical stuff. Bills, accounts, the insurance documents my attorney had asked for. But this time I went deeper. I wasn't looking for finances. I was looking for a life. His email had 2 accounts. I had known about the first one, the family one, the one where he got Amazon shipping notifications and school newsletters and the occasional forward from his buddy Mike. The second one I found, linked in the browser's saved passwords, a Gmail account I had never seen. The username was a variation of his name, slightly altered, the kind of thing you'd set up specifically to not be found. The inbox went back 4 years. I poured a glass of wine, sat at his desk, and read for 2 hours. I want to be careful here about what I share because some of what was in those emails doesn't belong to me. It belongs to a woman who was also being lied to. But what I can tell you is this. The emails were not the frantic, hidden language of an affair. They weren't charged or secretive in tone. They were, and this is the part that hollowed me out completely, domestic. Conversations about grocery pickup, a thread about whether to get a new couch or reupholster the old one. An email where Daniel had forwarded a funny video about dogs with the subject line "made me think of you," and she had responded with 3 laughing emojis, and I'm sending this to my sister. Normal, warm, comfortable, the language of 2 people who had built a life together and felt safe inside it. He had written to her the way he wrote to me. I closed the laptop and didn't open it again for 4 days. The financial picture came next, and it came in pieces. I had hired an attorney, a woman named Patricia, sharp and calm in the way that good attorneys always are, like they have seen enough of human nature to be unsurprised by any of it, to help me navigate the estate. Standard stuff, initially. House, accounts, the 401k, his life insurance policy through work. It was Patricia who first flagged the discrepancy. There was a checking account in Daniel's name alone, not a joint account, not something I had ever been added to. At a regional bank we had never used as a family. It had been open for at least 5 years. Regular deposits, modest but consistent. Regular withdrawals, too, in patterns that made sense once you knew what you were looking at. Rent, utilities, groceries, the occasional larger purchase. Furniture once, a car repair, twice. He had been funding an entire household for at least 5 years. I sat across from Patricia in her office on a Thursday afternoon while she walked me through the statements, and I remember thinking how strange it was that I wasn't crying. I had cried so much in the weeks after Daniel died, at random moments, in the car, in the shower, once in the cereal aisle at Kroger in a way that I still think about with a particular kind of embarrassment. But sitting there looking at 5 years of bank statements, I felt something quieter and colder than tears. I felt the ground shift permanently. The phone was the last piece. I had found it on my second visit to the apartment. I know. I said I wouldn't go back. But I had left my sunglasses on the kitchen counter like an absolute disaster of a person. And I needed them back because I needed the excuse to return. The phone was in the nightstand drawer on Daniel's side of the bed. An older iPhone, not his current one, in a plain black case. It was dead. I took it home, found a compatible charger in the box of cables I keep in the hall closet, because I am apparently incapable of throwing away a cable, and plugged it in. It powered up with a passcode prompt. I tried Biscuit plus Josh's birth year. Wrong. I tried our anniversary date. Wrong. I tried Mia's birthday. Wrong. I sat there for a moment. Then I tried Josh's birthday. It opened. I don't know what that meant. I'm not sure I want to. The texts were between Daniel and a contact saved simply as R, going back 3 years on this device alone. And the conversation had the easy, unguarded rhythm of 2 people who had long since stopped being careful around each other. Inside jokes I didn't understand. References to places I'd never heard him mention. A thread from last Christmas Eve where he had texted "wish I was there," and she had responded "I know." Me too. Next year. Next year. He had been making next year promises to another woman on Christmas Eve. I had been downstairs putting together a bike for Josh at midnight, cursing quietly at the instruction manual, eating the cookies we'd left out for Santa because I figured I'd earned them. There was one text that I keep coming back to. Sent 8 days before he died, on a Sunday night. She had texted him, "Do you ever think about just stopping all of it?" He had waited 11 minutes to respond. Then he wrote, "Every day. I just don't know what that looks like yet. I have read that exchange more times than I can count. I still don't know exactly what he meant. Stopping the secret. Stopping the marriage. Stopping everything. The ambiguity of it is its own particular kind of cruelty. A question left open by a man who ran out of time to answer it. What I do know is that somewhere in Dayton, a woman named Renee Calloway had been waiting for an answer too. And she didn't know yet that it was never coming. I found her on a Thursday morning in November. The kids were at school. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my third cup of coffee and Patricia's latest email open on my laptop. More estate paperwork, more boxes to check, more administrative evidence that a person had existed and now didn't. And I just decided, quietly, and without any particular drama, that I was done waiting to know. I typed the name into Facebook first. Renee Calloway, Dayton, Ohio. She came up on the third result. I want to tell you that I was prepared for whatever I found. I wasn't. I don't think there is a preparation for the moment a stranger's face loads on your screen. And you understand, with complete and terrible clarity, that this person has been living a parallel version of your life. Her profile was partially public. Profile photo, a candid shot, outdoors, that same green jacket from the refrigerator photo. She was smiling at something off camera. She looked like someone's friend, someone's daughter, someone's, and this is the word my brain produced before I could stop it, wife. She was 38 years old. She worked as an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation center in Dayton. Her profile listed no relationship status. Her last public post was from 3 weeks after Daniel died, a vague, quietly devastated thing about loss and not knowing how to talk about grief when you can't explain where it's coming from. I read that post 4 times. She was mourning him, publicly, in the only way she could, coded and careful and heartbreaking. She was mourning the same man I had buried, and nobody in her comments section knew why. They wrote thinking of you, and here if you need anything, and sending love without knowing what they were actually responding to. She was completely alone in it, and that, more than the apartment, more than the bank account, more than the Christmas Eve text, that is what finally broke something open in me. Not anger, not even grief exactly. Something more complicated and harder to name. Because I had been surrounded by people when Daniel died, 83 at the funeral, casseroles for 2 weeks, my sister on the couch for 10 days, my mother calling every morning at 8. Renee Calloway had none of that. She couldn't tell a single person why she was falling apart. I need to stop here and tell you something that I think is important. Up until this moment, the apartment, the emails, the bank account, the phone, I had been building a case. Unconsciously, maybe, but still, I had been collecting evidence in the way that betrayed people do, because evidence gives you something to hold on to when the emotional reality is too large to carry directly. It gives you facts. And facts feel safer than feelings when everything is collapsing. But looking at Renee Calloway's Facebook page, something shifted. Because here is the thing I had been circling for weeks without letting myself land on it. She didn't know about me, not as a theory, not as a possibility I was entertaining. I knew it, looking at that profile, the same way I had known in the apartment that she was real. The grief in that post was not the grief of a woman who had been complicit in a lie. It was the grief of someone who had lost the person she thought was hers. Daniel hadn't just cheated on me. He had built a complete life with another woman, a real one, a full one, with domestic rhythms and inside jokes and next-year promises. And he had let her believe in it the same way he had let me believe in mine. He had lied to both of us, with equal care, equal intention, equal precision. We were not a wife and a mistress. That would have been in some terrible way simpler, cleaner. There is an established script for that particular betrayal. It is awful, and it is common, and there are words for what each person is. This was something else. This was 2 women who had each been handed a complete version of the same man. 2 different stories, told with the same voice, the same handwriting on the birthday cards, the same real smile in the photographs. 2 lives that had never been designed to intersect, until now. I closed the laptop, sat with it for a long time, and then I did something that I still think about, whether it was brave or reckless or just the only thing I was capable of doing in that moment. I found her email address through the Rehabilitation Center's staff directory, and I wrote her a message. Hi, Renee. My name is Claire Marsh. I was Daniel's wife. I think we need to talk. I pressed send before I could talk myself out of it, and then I sat at my kitchen table and waited to find out what happened when two parallel lives finally touched. She responded in 4 hours. I had spent those 4 hours doing approximately nothing useful. I had loaded and unloaded the dishwasher twice. I had folded a basket of laundry, and then left it on the couch instead of putting it away. I had stood in front of the open refrigerator for a full minute and a half before closing it without taking anything out. I had checked my email 37 times. I know because my phone shows you that information now, which feels like a feature designed specifically to humiliate you during the worst moments of your life. Her response was 4 sentences. I don't know what to say. I didn't know about you. I need a few days. Can we meet in person? I wrote back immediately. Yes. Wherever you want. Whenever you're ready. She picked a coffee shop in Dayton. Neutral ground. Not near the apartment, not near Daniel's office, not near anything that belonged to either of our versions of him. A place called Groundwork Coffee on 5th Street. The kind of local spot with mismatched furniture and too many plants, and a chalkboard menu that changes seasonally. Somewhere anonymous enough to fall apart in without anyone knowing your name. We met on a Tuesday, 11 in the morning, 2 weeks after my email. I got there first. I picked a table near the back. Not a booth, just 2 chairs facing each other across a small wooden table. Because something about a booth felt too intimate for what this was. I ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and sat with my hands in my lap and watched the door. She walked in at 11:04. I recognized her immediately from the photos. Green jacket, a different one this time, charcoal, but the same style. Brown hair down. She was scanning the room with the careful, slightly braced expression of a person who is holding themselves together through sheer force of will, and knows that the holding might not last much longer. Our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. There was nothing to smile about. She sat down across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. 2 women, studying the face of someone who had every reason to be their enemy, and somehow wasn't. I had thought about this moment for 2 weeks, had rehearsed things to say, questions to ask, ways to begin. And sitting there across from Renee Calloway, every prepared word I had evaporated completely. She spoke first. She said, "How long?" I said, 14 years. We got married in 2009. Something moved across her face that I don't have a clean word for. Not shock exactly. I think she had already processed the broad outline of it in the 2 weeks since my email. More like the specific pain of a number landing. 14 years. She looked down at the table for a moment, then back up. 4, she said. We'd been together for 4 years. He told me he'd been divorced, that it had been amicable, that there were kids but that he was involved, that he co-parented, that everything was settled. I heard every word of that clearly. He had told her he was divorced. He hadn't just hidden me. He had erased me, constructed a clean, sympathetic backstory, the amicable divorce, the involved father, everything settled, and handed it to her like it was the truth, given her a version of himself that had no inconvenient wife attached to it, just a man with a complicated past that he'd handled responsibly. I said, "We were still married. We lived together. Our kids didn't know anything was wrong." She closed her eyes briefly. Then she said, "He told me he traveled for work, that he was gone 3-4 nights a week because of project sites. He did travel," I said, "sometimes, but not as much as he told you." We sat with that for a moment. What followed was 2 hours of the strangest conversation I have ever had in my life. We compared timelines the way detectives compare evidence. Carefully, methodically, with the particular focus of 2 people who need the full picture even when the full picture is unbearable. He had met Renee at a work conference in Columbus in the fall of 2020. Had pursued her. Had been, by her account, patient and consistent, and exactly the right amount of attentive. Not overwhelming, not distant, just present in the specific way that makes a person feel chosen. The same word I had used. Present. He had told her he loved her 8 months in, had helped her move into the apartment on Elm Court, had suggested it, actually, had found the listing, had helped carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs on a Saturday in April, had set up her bookshelf, had hung her curtains. I thought about the curtains, navy blue. I had noticed them in the apartment. I had assumed they came with the place. He had hung her curtains on a Saturday in April and come home to me on a Sunday like it was nothing. Renee had never pressured him to formalize anything. She had trusted the pace, trusted that a man with kids and a recent divorce needed time to navigate the logistics of a next chapter. She had been, by her own account, patient. I thought I was being understanding, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands around her coffee cup were not. I thought I was giving him space to do it right. I thought that was why it was taking time. It was taking time, I said, because there was nothing to transition to. There was no plan. We weren't separated. We weren't headed for divorce. We were going to Mia's winter recital and making grocery lists and talking about maybe redoing the back porch next summer. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that I have thought about almost every day since. So who was he when he was with you? And I understood immediately what she was asking. Not logistics, not timeline. She was asking, was the man I knew real? Was the version of him I loved an actual person, or a character he put on like a coat when he walked through a particular door? I thought about it honestly. He was a good father, I said. That part I believe. He was patient with the kids in a way you can't fake consistently for 14 years. He remembered things. He showed up. She nodded slowly. He was like that with me too. The showing up. I think that was real, I said. I think he was genuinely capable of love. I just think he was also capable of... I stopped. Searched for the right word. Compartmentalizing, she offered quietly. Yeah, I said. At a level most people can't even conceive of. We sat in Groundwork Coffee for another 40 minutes after that. Not comparing notes anymore. Just 2 women sitting with the wreckage of the same earthquake. At some point, Renee ordered a tea she also didn't drink. At some point, I looked out the window and noticed it had started to rain. When we finally stood up to leave, we hugged. I don't know who reached first. It doesn't matter. It was the hug of 2 people who understood something about each other that no one else in either of their lives could fully reach. Walking to my car in the rain, I thought, Daniel spent 4 years making sure we would never meet. And in the end, he introduced us anyway. I thought the coffee shop was the bottom. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. I genuinely believe that sitting across from Renee Calloway and mapping the architecture of Daniel's double life was the worst thing I was going to have to survive in this process. I had found the apartment. I had read the emails. I had held the phone. I had looked another woman in the eye and compared notes on the man we had both loved without knowing about each other. Surely that was the floor. It was not the floor. The floor came 6 weeks later, on a Monday afternoon in Patricia's office, with a cup of bad conference room coffee going cold on the table beside me and a document I was not prepared for sitting open on her desk. Patricia had been thorough. That's what you pay her for. And she delivered. In reviewing the full scope of Daniel's estate, assets, accounts, outstanding liabilities, insurance policies, she had flagged something that required a separate conversation, not an email, not a quick call, a meeting. I had known, walking into her office that Monday, that it was going to be bad. Patricia is not a woman who schedules in-person meetings for good news. She had the specific energy of someone who has practiced delivering information carefully and has learned that the kindest version of bad news is still bad news. So you might as well be clear. She slid a document across the desk. It was a life insurance policy. Not the one I knew about. The one through Daniel's employer. The one that had already been processed. The one that was helping me keep the house and the kids in their school, and some version of stability intact while I figured out what came next. A second policy. A private one, taken out 3 years ago through a separate insurer. A significant sum. I'm not going to say the number because it still makes me feel physically ill. With a single named beneficiary, Renee Calloway. I stared at the document for a long time. Patricia let me. She's good at that. Knowing when to talk, and when to simply let the information do what it needs to do to a person before they're ready to respond. When I finally looked up, I said, "He took out a life insurance policy for her." Patricia said, "Yes." While we were married, yes. Using what money? Premiums were drawn from the secondary account. The one we identified in the earlier review. The account I hadn't known existed. The one he had been funding quietly for 5 years. He hadn't just been paying her rent and her utilities and buying her a couch and hanging her curtains. He had been building her a safety net. A future. A financial cushion specifically designed to catch her if something happened to him. He had thought about her dying alone without resources, and he had done something about it. I thought about that, turned it over. Then I said, "Did he have anything like this for me? Anything beyond the work policy?" Patricia's expression answered before she did. "No. I was the wife. I was on the work policy, the joint accounts, the mortgage, the legal infrastructure of a 14-year marriage. I was protected in the ways that a spouse is automatically protected. Not because he had chosen it, but because the law requires it. Renee had been protected because he chose it. He had sat down at some point, deliberately, privately, with intention, and decided that she needed more, that the ordinary mechanisms of their arrangement weren't sufficient, that he wanted to make sure that if he died, she would be okay. He had made that decision without ever telling me he had made it. I called Renee that evening. I had her number by then. We had exchanged them at the coffee shop, the way you do when you've just had a conversation that creates an involuntary bond, when you both know you're the only person in each other's life who fully understands the specific thing you're carrying. She picked up on the second ring. I told her about the policy. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know." "I know," I said. "Claire, I swear to you I didn't." "Renee." I stopped her. "I believe you." And I did. By that point, I had enough of the picture to understand that Daniel had been the architect of all of it. Every wall, every door, every carefully maintained separation. Renee hadn't asked for a secret policy. She hadn't asked for any of it. She had asked for a relationship with a man she believed was available, and he had handed her one that looked exactly like the real thing. We were both on the receiving end of the same elaborate construction. The difference was just in the paperwork. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The house was quiet. Kids in bed, dog asleep on the rug, the refrigerator making that low humming sound it's made for 3 years that I keep meaning to have looked at. All the ordinary sounds of a life. I thought about Daniel sitting at a desk somewhere, filling out a beneficiary form with Renee's name on it, signing it, filing it, coming home for dinner. I thought about what kind of person does that. And then I thought about something harder. I thought about the fact that I had loved that person. Completely. Without reservation. For 14 years. And that the love had been real, even if the man hadn't been fully. That might be the most disorienting thing of all. Not the betrayal itself, but the discovery that genuine love is apparently no protection against being completely deceived by the person you've given it to. You can love someone with your whole heart and still not know them. That's not a romantic notion. That's just the truth. There was a night in January where I didn't get out of bed. Not the whole day. I got up for the kids, made breakfast, got them to school, came back, and then just stopped. Sat on the edge of the mattress and couldn't find a reason to stand up again. Didn't cry. Didn't sleep. Just sat there in the gray January light, coming through the curtains, watching the dust move in the air, and feeling the full weight of everything I had been carrying for the past 3 months land on me all at once. Grief for Daniel. The real one. The one I had actually known, or thought I had. Grief for the marriage, which I couldn't mourn publicly the way widows are supposed to because I no longer knew exactly what I was mourning. Grief for the version of myself that had existed before October 9th, the woman who thought she knew her own life, who felt solid inside it. Rage, somewhere underneath all of it, hot and directionless and exhausting, and something else, something I hadn't expected and didn't have a name for yet. Shame, not because I had done anything wrong. I want to be careful here because I know how that sounds. And I know how many women internalize blame that was never theirs to carry. I hadn't done anything wrong, but there is a particular shame that comes from being deceived so completely, from realizing that something enormous was happening inside your own life and you didn't see it, couldn't see it, were, in some fundamental way, the last to know. I sat with all of that on the edge of my bed until 2 p.m, and then Biscuit came upstairs. He does that sometimes. Just appears, like he's checking on you, nose first around the doorframe. He's not a particularly intuitive dog. He's actually a little bit stupid in the lovable, uncomplicated way of golden retrievers everywhere. But he came upstairs and put his chin on my knee and looked up at me with those completely guileless eyes. And I thought, with sudden and almost embarrassing clarity, this dog has no idea any of this happened. He just knows I'm still here. I put my hand on his head, and something in me quietly decided to stay. The turning point didn't announce itself. That's what I want you to understand. There was no single moment of clarity, no dramatic resolution, no morning where I woke up and felt like myself again. It was slower than that, and less cinematic, and in some ways harder, because there was no clear before and after. Just a gradual, barely perceptible shift in which direction the weight was pulling. What changed first was small. I stopped trying to reconcile the two Daniels. For months I had been attempting, unconsciously, to merge them, to find the unified theory of the man that explained both the father who remembered Josh's sock seam and the man who filed a secret insurance policy with another woman's name on it. I kept looking for the thing that made it make sense. The wound in his past, the character flaw with a clean origin, the explanation that would allow me to file the whole thing under a category I understood. I stopped looking, not because I gave up, because I realized the reconciliation was never going to come, and that waiting for it was keeping me standing in a doorway instead of moving through it. He was both things. People are both things. The love was real, and the deception was real, and those two facts were going to have to exist in the same space indefinitely, without resolving into something neater. That was not a comforting realization. It was, however, a true one. And somewhere in the process of accepting it, really accepting it, not just intellectually but in the body, in the place where grief actually lives, I found something I hadn't expected to find. I found myself, not the self I'd been before. That woman was gone in ways that were permanent, and I was done pretending otherwise, but a different one, quieter, less certain about things she'd once taken for granted, more careful with her trust, not closed, just careful. A woman who had learned, at considerable cost, the difference between a life that looks solid and a life that actually is. I decided I wanted the second kind. Whatever it took. However long it took. I wanted to build something that was real all the way through. It's been 14 months since I found those keys. 14 months since I stood in a doorway on Elm Court and understood that the ground I had been standing on for 14 years was not what I thought it was. 14 months of paperwork and attorneys and conversations I never anticipated having, and nights I wasn't sure I was going to get through, and mornings that surprised me by being okay. The house is still mine. That took some navigating. The estate, the accounts, the secondary policy. All of it required more legal untangling than I have the energy to fully describe. Patricia earned every cent I paid her. In the end, the kids and I are stable. Not untouched. Not unchanged. But stable. Which in the months after October 9th felt like an almost unreachable destination. And is now just Tuesday. Mia is 13 now. She knows more than I would have chosen for her to know at this age. Not everything, but enough. She's sharp in the way that girls who've been through something tend to get sharp. A little older behind the eyes than her friends. Quicker to notice when adults are performing fine rather than actually being it. I worry about her sometimes. I also think she's going to be extraordinary. Josh is 10. He misses his dad in the simple, uncomplicated way that 10-year-old boys miss their fathers. He wants to show him things. Wants to tell him about the soccer goal he scored in October. Wants the specific presence of him at the breakfast table on Saturday mornings. He doesn't know the full shape of what I know. Someday he might need to. That's a conversation I think about and put back down regularly, like something I'm not ready to carry yet. But no, I will have to eventually. Biscuit is fine. Still a little stupid. Still checks on me. Renee and I text occasionally. Not often. Not the way friends text. There's too much weight in the connection for it to feel casual, and I think we both understand that. But a few times a month, one of us will send something to the other. An article. A dumb meme. Sometimes just a check-in that says, hey, and means I'm still here and I know you are too, and that still means something. We had dinner together once, about 6 months ago. A quiet Italian place, just the two of us. A bottle of wine neither of us finished. We didn't talk about Daniel much. We talked about her job, my students, the renovation she was doing on a new apartment, the book I'd been trying to finish for 3 months. Normal things. Human things. At one point she said, "I still don't know whether to be angry at him or miss him." I said, "I do both, usually on the same day." She nodded like that was the most useful thing anyone had said to her in months. Maybe it was. I went back to Elm Court once. Just drove past. Didn't stop. Didn't park. Someone new lives in 4B now. There was a different doormat outside. A kid's Halloween decoration still up in the window even though it was mid-November. The small cheerful evidence of a life being lived without any knowledge of what had happened inside those walls before. I kept driving. There was nothing there for me anymore. There is something here, though. In this house, with these kids, with this dog, with this version of myself, that I am still in the process of meeting. It's not the life I thought I had, but it's mine. All the way through. And that, it turns out, is not nothing. That's everything. I want to be careful here, because I know how these stories are supposed to end. I know the shape of the lesson that's expected, the clean takeaway, the reframed perspective, the moment where the narrator tells you what it all meant and hands you something useful to carry out the door with you. I'm going to try to tell you the truth instead. The truth is that I don't have a tidy lesson. I have something messier and more honest than that. I have a set of things I know now that I didn't know before. Not because I'm wiser, but because I paid for them at a price I wouldn't wish on anyone. So here they are. Take what's useful. Leave what isn't. The first thing is this. Knowing someone is not the same as understanding them. I knew Daniel's coffee order and his childhood and the way he breathed when he was falling asleep. I knew 14 years of Saturdays. And I did not know him. Those two things are both true. Intimacy is not the same as transparency. And the people closest to us are sometimes the ones with the most room to hide. The second thing. A life that looks solid from the inside can still be built on something hollow. Not because you were naive. Not because you missed obvious signs. But because some people are extraordinarily skilled at construction, at building something that feels real because they need it to feel real, because they are, on some level, as trapped inside the architecture as you are. That doesn't excuse it, but it reframes where the failure actually lived. And the third thing, the one I come back to most, build a life you can see all the way to the edges of, not a perfect life, not an invulnerable one, but one where you know what you're standing on, one where the foundation is made of things you've actually examined, rather than things you assumed were solid because they'd held so far. I am still building that life. Some days I have no idea what I'm doing. Most days I think I'm going to be okay. And on the days in between, I think about Renee, still here. I think about Mia getting sharp and strong. I think about Josh scoring that goal with nobody watching but me. I think about a dog who came upstairs on a Tuesday in January just to put his chin on my knee. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Thanks for listening.